1. Okay, what's going on, YouTube? It's PNG News, PNG Media News here again, coming at you with the interview today. This is going to be part of my new segment, People and Lifestyles. You're in for a very, very special treat. I have social worker, author, Kristen Jackson. She's going to be talking today about her book, Daddy Issues. And the book is part of a larger conversation on the whole concept of daddy issues that a lot of women, especially in the African-American community, deal with. So without further ado, I'm gonna let Miss Jackson have it. How you doing, Miss Jackson?
I'm good, thank you. Please call me Christian. That's just fine. I'm doing good. Okay. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. So
there's my book.
Yes, I want everybody to get, I'm gonna be saying this throughout the interview. Please go to Amazon.com, pick the book up. I believe it's on Barnes and Noble as well. Not just women, men, everybody should be required reading for any type of social work training program, any type of thing that deals with life, with people and lifestyles. This is definitely a book you want to read. So,
yes,
so I understand that. So tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Yes, so I am a licensed professional counselor here in South Carolina. I support women who are in recovery from relationship trauma via daddy issues, which we're going to get into tonight. But that can look like a lot of different things. Even when I say relationship trauma, I want people to understand that I'm not just talking about dating or romantic relationships. Even in my books, I'm talking about how we need to pay attention more to relationship with self, with the God of your understanding, as far as spirituality goes, our kids, our friends, our coworkers, colleagues, supervisors, because we show up in certain spaces in very specific ways based on our experiences. And so that is usually shaped by significant events in our lives. And so I specialize in trauma, which is at the very least a major event that you would consider and you would name, but basically how has this event changed the way you look at the world? How does that change the way you emote, show your emotions or not show your emotions? And how does this affect the way you connect with other people? And so I've coined myself the daddy issues expert, and really finding that a lot of what working through daddy issues looks like is addressing these different pieces in relationships and how those messages from our fathers do affect the way that we actually interact with other people. I own and operate Couch with Christian. It is evolving and growing, my business. She was born with the book back in 2020 when I self-published them. There's the book that you saw, and then there's also the workbook. So in 2020, when I launched, it was to self-publish. I've been doing a lot of stuff on my personal page at the time, way back in like 2017, 18, just letting people know different mental health tips and things like that as far as taking care of self, because I think that's something that, especially in the Black community, we didn't really have a lot of access to. And so I'm learning all this great information. I'm getting trained on different things. I'm EMDR trained as a therapist in my private practice that I own. And I still, while I think that we need to do our best to pay for the services that we want. You get what you pay for when it comes to healing, get your nails done, your hair done, your haircut, whatever it is. I also think it's important for us to still have access to things that, your therapist or life coach would have. The things that I'm learning aren't secrets. And so I've always kind of in the last few years, the more that I've learned in my profession, been really adamant about people having access to this information. So that comes in different forms. And I think the most recent and biggest thing for me has been my books.
Okay. So let me ask you, how did you get into the whole profession of counseling anyway?
Yeah, that's never a question I really know how to answer. I like to think back to high school when I was with my group of friends, and you kind of talk about boys and you talk about your problems and all the things going on. And so I was one of the people who had some type of insight, I would like to say, and an opinion. And so at the time in high school, I thought, hey, I'm good at talking to people. And then I got to college and majored in psychology and thought, oh, this is way more than I thought it was going to be. They tell you to do research and get into doing all these internships and stuff like that. It was way less about the connection that I thought it would be. But I stuck with it, got my psych degree, and then I took a break before I went back to get my master's because I was adamant about not going back to school. I didn't want to do that. But if I fast forward, I got my master's degree and then got into licensing. The process here in South Carolina requires us to be under a supervisor for 2 years, kind of like a doctor, doing their residency.
Okay.
And so me being where I am today comes from trying to understand myself. If I could summarize it, as the more I learned about the profession and how I could understand how people work, we get triggered. This work brings up a lot of our own personal things, and I got activated for some stuff that I thought I was normal in my childhood that really wasn't, aka trauma. And so the more that I learned, the more deeply I got into the field, I became more interested. And I guess there's like this running joke in our field, as you may know, is like people who are therapists are trying to fix themselves. So I think that was kind of what was running in the background for me.
Okay. All right. So now before I dive into the book, I just want to get a little bit more background. So how long was it between when you started practicing that that the book came into being?
Yeah, that's a good question. I started my career as a counselor. My very first counselor job was back in 2014. That's when I graduated, May 2014. And then by August, I had a job. I was an adolescent counselor. So I used to work in an agency that would support people in recovery from substance use disorders. And I was on the adolescent hall. And I learned a lot about how to treat their family. I am a professional counselor. I'm not a social worker, but I have an appreciation for the micro and macro and levels of care and connecting to community partnerships and making sure people and their families had resources, right? So that was where I started my career and really had an appreciation for making sure that I understood the whole person and treat the whole person. And so the book, I began to write it in 2019. I was underutilized at a position I had at that time. And so if I didn't have a client, then I would be jotting down ideas and kind of putting notes together in between sessions or at home at night, late at night or whatever, writing my book. And then I self-published it in July 2020. So I would say it took a while to write it. For some people, it would happen pretty quickly between me writing it and actually figuring out how to publish it. But it felt long because it brought up a lot of things for me as I was writing it and kind of telling my story.
Okay. So I'm gonna put it on the screen again for everybody to see. It's daddy issues. All right. So now, when I read it, because I'm a therapist as well, when I read this book, I mean, it was just like, whoa, I had to put it down for a second. I'm like, wait a minute. I was just talking to someone in therapy about this. I'm like, whoa, I mean, I've actually taken this book and given it, clients tell them to go get this book, I mean, because it speaks to so much that a lot of African-American women that I deal with. I'm like, whoa, it's like, was she listening to my therapy session when she wrote this? It was crazy. So, so I mean, I'm not trying to do a commercial here, but that's just how powerful some of the things that came out in the book. So how did you come up with daddy's issues? I mean, what made you call it that?
I think in the beginning, so my dad and I tell the story of how I experienced my dad. It's not about him or his trauma story. Those details are for him to share if he decides to. And so him and I, as you read in the book, we've had like an up and down kind of relationship. It's been pretty tumultuous for probably the last 15 years. I'm 35 now. I don't do math, but it was like 21 when we kind of first fell out. Okay. And so him and I would talk for a while and then we don't. And when I say a while, I mean like years at a time since I was 21 years old. And so during that time, at some point, I became a therapist. And, as you know, we have to do an assessment with our clients where we first meet them. We get all up in your business, y'all. Like we ask you all your history and, your family history and stuff like that. And I started to hear a pattern as I was asking my clients, especially with women, about their relationships with their families, whether it be their mom or whoever their village was. And there was either a gap where dad wasn't even mentioned, or I would ask about dad and then the relationship wasn't that great. And then if I fast forward to why they were even coming to therapy, a lot of it was that anxiety and depression because they just didn't trust people. They were putting walls up, and that was causing a lot of friction in themselves because, you know, as humans, we want to have relationships, but then we can't figure out why and what that is. And I began to kind of put stuff together as far as obviously we have lots of messages and things we learn from the presence of a father or the absence, all the way wherever on that spectrum. And so I frankly became triggered in session a lot. I was really activated, like, oh my God, me too. You know, like I was really relating to their stories, but then I was not, you know, when you're in session, you understand we can't make the session
Right.
about us. So
Right.
I ended up having to go to therapy. And I worked through a lot of things with my therapist at the time. And she would do the thing that we ask our clients to consider doing: write a letter to your dad, or write a letter to your mom, or the person who hurt you, to let it go and, you know, forgive. And I was like, oh crap, I don't want to do that. But I did, you know, because I really wanted to work through stuff. Because things were kind of showing up about in my personal life, and I was serious about trying to be better. And so the letter to my dad turned into, you know, journal entries about how I was feeling at the time, and really kind of connecting with Christian and who she was at 12 and 14 and 16, and just thinking about who my clients are now and their stories and how much I can relate. And the way that I categorize things, even on my blog, on my website or something, I'm a list girl. So I have to kind of put things in categories just to help people make sense of stuff in my brain, because she's everywhere. And so I called it Daddy Issues because frankly, there was a pattern, and I kind of wanted to activate people when they saw the title, because it's already like in your face. You know, people get really uncomfortable when they see Daddy Issues. And I thought, hey, this is a great book. It's a marketing thing. Daddy Issues. What is this? And then I ended up finding out that some people are kind of turned off. They don't even want to look at it, which I understand, because just the name itself triggers you enough to where you're just going to avoid it, like you have been your whole life. And I get that. The tagline is how to detangle from the sins of our fathers, because in a session, I take very seriously to heart the fact that I may not see that person again. People come back to me, they like me. And, you know, I've seen people for 2 or 3 years at a time now, you know, for however frequent they need me. That's not the point. I think what I'm trying to say is really just that I really want people to walk away with stuff when they come to my session. So I always think, like, if like my internet's down and we have to miss a few weeks, I want you to have something every single session. How to has to happen. And so the book is the same way. Even like if you read the book, I would advise people to pace themselves through the material, because it can be activating. It would, like I said, it was hard to write, but every chapter, in between each chapter, I'm giving you reflection questions and or activities, because you may be triggered from reading the chapter about daddy issues in your marriage or motherhood. And I think that that's important for me, and it's responsible, frankly, of me to be a professional who cares about how you are receiving the material and how you're taking care of yourself. And so it was really organic, because I really only speak from an organic, authentic place. Even when I'm live on my Instagram or something, I'm usually going through the thing I'm talking about and sharing my thoughts, because I think people relate to it. And so if you can get past the title and dive into the book, I promise you, you have everything you need to work through it if you work it, because I even give you an assessment where you see, how am I taking care of myself now, mind, body, soul? And then you get to kind of rate yourself at the end, to check in with how well you have taken care of yourself throughout the book. So it's it's an interactive experience. And that's what I wanted to.
Okay. Now, I know there's like this, there's like, I don't know if you want to call it stereotype, but when you hear someone say they have daddy issues, you think of a girl who was spoiled by her dad. Now she's attracted to old men with money buying her gifts. So is that accurate? Or I mean, what is really a daddy issue? Or is it like a myriad, a spectrum of issues?
Yes. B is a spectrum of issues. I happen to just kind of, daddy issues is the umbrella. And then when you're exactly right, it's a derogatory term. It's used to weaponize as a weapon against women and her character. without really asking about her story. You automatically assume she's a whore or a freak or someone who is, like you said, a sugar baby and only dating old men. And so when I came up with daddy issues, I knew that I knew that based on my training as a trauma specialist, we got to name this thing. And so in the beginning of the book, you get my diagnosis. So this is all daddy issues according to Christian. Like, you get to name what it is for you. I'm just giving you a framework. And so I based it upon, like, I give you criteria. And as you know, we're diagnosing people. We have the DSM-5, which is now about to be the TR, I think it's about to come out. But the big counselor Bible, I like to call it, is how we diagnose you with your schizophrenia, your depression, your anxiety, whatever. It's based on criteria. You have to check off these boxes. So I based it off of separation anxiety and reactive attachment disorder. And that is where you have a literal shift in your mood. You are so worried and your world has changed if you are separated from a significant person. There's excessive worry, you're feeling abandoned, there's rejection. There's also issues with authority. So that's kind of where reactive attachment disorder comes in. You're having trouble attaching to someone who is an authority figure because you're always shifting. So there's an insecurity. And that particular diagnosis, RAD, is given usually to kids who are in the foster care system because they're always having to be on guard. I don't know where I'm going to go next if I get placed in this home and that. And so how can you feel safe or trust the person who's supposed to take care of you? Out of that comes, like you said, a myriad of issues. And so I give you a diagnosis so that when you read it, you have something, you have language for it, other than I have daddy issues and someone writes you off as, oh, she just like old men, she's a freak, whatever. You know, like, you get to say, no, daddy, I have daddy issues. So this means what I'm taking from this diagnosis of daddy issues is that I have issues with abandonment. I don't trust people. And if I get close to someone, I get really nervous that you're going to let me down. After reading the book, you're able to say that very clearly. So if you engage with the therapist or a life coach or whoever, you can say that I know that my boundary issues or the fact that I'm so clingy, which is one of the women that I talk about in the book, the clingy type, I'm this way because I'm so afraid that if I let you go, I'm going to be alone. That's what the diagnosis gives you. That's what I'm doing, is hoping to push the daddy issues movement forward so that people have a different perspective, a shift in the way that you would empathize with the woman who has had a tough childhood. So we're going to talk about, you know, Jessica with 8 baby daddies and, you know, 10 pregnancies, and she's only working at the Circle K, and she's really trying her best in her eyes. All she knows, because that's what her trauma experience has been. Oh, she got daddy issues. But if you describe her as someone who's had emotional trauma throughout her life, neglect, and didn't have anyone to teach her how to use the proper coping skills when she was activated, someone who had to fight her way through life, then, you know, we're more sympathetic to that woman, but they're the same person. And so I'm really wanting people to look at women with daddy issues, quote unquote, as women who are dealing with emotional trauma. That's really what it is. And that's how I treat it.
Okay. Now, all right. So now let's see how do I phrase this question? Because I'm getting to the controversial stuff here.
Yes,
okay,
let's go.
Daddy's issues. So how does so how should men, what should men take away from this? Because after all, it's daddies and daddies are men. So what should men not even take away from this? How should they work to prevent this?
Okay. I've gotten that question a lot from men lately. I was on a podcast with a couple other guys a couple weeks ago, and they were like, well, how do we not like have our daughters have daddy issues? That was their question.
Right.
So I appreciate the question because I think it's a level of awareness that we need to have. So first of all, when I'm talking about daddy issues, it's not to bash men. I have a wonderful husband who happens to be amazing, and he has daddy issues. And he will probably impart that on our children. And just like I will impart mommy issues onto our children because we parent a certain way. And of course, it's going to affect the next generations. And so as we kind of think about how to not do the thing, I really just wanted to say that so we can lift the guilt and the shame associated with us just trying to do our best. When we're talking about dads or men who are fathers, whether you were a stepfather or a father figure, maybe you're an uncle or a mentor, not imparting certain values on or certain negative issues onto people. It's really just a matter of, like I said earlier, self-awareness. So now that you have heard this interview, like whenever it airs, you can't unhear it. You've heard Mike ask you these questions. I have laid out for you the gist of what daddy issues are. Now we can catch ourselves. So for the daddies of daughters, what is it that I am imparting upon my daughter that may be harmful later? For example, am I telling her she can't join the dance team because they got to wear leotards, and my daughter is not going to be caught dead in nothing that's going to show part of her butt and that's going to be too tight? That is something that you are doing, sir, as an example, to that you're parenting out of fear and perhaps your own trauma, right? So like your daughter just wants to dance, but somehow you have done what most men do, and not in this inappropriate way, but sometimes yes, because I do treat women who have unfortunately dealt with the very specific pain of being sexually abused by their dads. Like that's a thing. But for the man who's like, no, my daughter ain't gonna wear this, or she's not gonna hang out with that crew, and she too grown, she wearing the lipstick and the makeup and stuff, that's an issue that dad has. And so by him saying that towards his daughter, or about his daughter, around his daughter, about the other girls who were on the dance team, what messages is the daughter taking away? That if I wear this thing, I'm gonna be a hoe. I'm going to disappoint my daddy, right? And so that's like where perfectionism could be born, and performing and people pleasing comes from, right? So can we encourage our men and support our men in parenting our daughters by saying, you know, when she's a teenager and she is growing breast and she has her period or whatever the case is, how can we mitigate your natural tendency to sexualize her or adultify her? There's that theory of adultification where we say girls are too grown because they're doing this and that, when really their bodies are just developing. That's a whole different issue. But if we're going to talk about how men can, quote unquote, avoid giving their daughters daddy issues, check with self. So there's a study, I think, in a book that I cannot remember right now, but it says that there's a shift in the relationship with daughters when between fathers and daughters when the daughter is going through puberty, because somehow it just feels weird that my daughter is like shaping up like up to be like a woman. She's developing. She has a different mind now. She's more emotional because of the hormonal surges, all that stuff. How can you take care of yourself, father of a daughter, when that time comes? What issues can you work out? Because there's something that you're sitting with, and that is going to hands down and be activated when your daughter gets older. Like, what have you not dealt with? It's probably your own daddy issues and or your own mommy issues, because our kids, they trigger the crap out of us. You know what I'm saying? My kids do that to me all the time. And so it's that constant ongoing check-in is going to be really important for the man to consider when he is parenting his daughter, because she is going to bring up stuff in you, whether it's the women you dealt with over the years, your mom, your auntie, or the women you dated, or whatever the case is. Men who are dating men, still same thing. There is a very intimate piece of us that is activated and triggered by people that we're around, no matter what it's going to look like. And so we'll have to kind of take an inventory of what those experiences are so we can do better.
See, that's where the kind of confusion came in, because when I read that, it's like, okay, I was thinking, okay, if I was a dad, how, it's like a thin line, because like I said, you don't want to, like you said, tell your daughter, okay, you can't dance, wear this, because you're looking like a little slut. But at the same time, you don't want to give them too much freedom. You think, okay, wear whatever you want to wear, put on tons of makeup. So as a man, how do you make that distinction of how do you balance that?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question, because I think that brings up a point of making it very clear, again, one of those permission things, so we don't guilt ourselves as parents or you daddies of daughters. But if you're trying to protect her, right? And so kudos to you for wanting to protect her. It's such a sweet thing that you don't want her to be hurt in whatever way that looks like if she were to wear a leotard. The question comes in where we have to consider, are there other ways to protect my daughter
Okay.
besides attaching shame to the leotard?
Mhm.
So this is where men have an opportunity to say, this is what, according to the values in your household, this is what we're going to do to make sure that we are presenting ourselves in a healthy way, because maybe we need to have the talk about sexual assault and the proper names for our body parts, and having that open dialogue about stuff, not to scare, but to inform. So how do you feel when you start to like boys? You know this is going to come. Maybe you're going to start to like girls, whatever that looks like, because the ultimate protection is having conversations. And so we're placing that kind of looking down on your nose at the leotard, shameful attachment to the leotard. We're placing that language with, let's talk whenever you feel like you're feeling different, or you have some questions about some stuff, about some confusing feelings you may have, just come talk to me. And what better place for that daughter to hear from her dad, that she is protected and she's safe and she heard, but her dad. Like, that is a daddy issue we want. Like, we want to hear that from dad. Daddy's giving me permission to express myself no matter what. I won't get in trouble if I say that I have this crush or that I was touched, right? And so I have more, I'm more inclined to share those things with my dad, because he's already opened up that communication with me and told me I can tell him anything. So my God, that does so much for the daddy-daughter relationship, that dad has opened up that dialogue and shown that he can be there for her. So we know you're trying to protect your daughters, but there's a different way to do it.
Okay. Now, all right. So now, second question, as far as the messages that fathers send to their daughters. Now, say if you're a dad was like, okay, I have, my child, African-American daughter, and I'm going to treat her like a little princess because, most African-American, like Malcolm X said, Black woman is the most unprotected woman in the world. So you say, well, my daughter's going to know that she's protected. I spoil her. I constantly tell her she's great and all this. And, is that a bad thing? Because is that going to make her think like, okay, every man should treat me like this? Or again, where's that line? Where's that balance in that relationship?
Yeah, lots of fine lines, right? I think that this is where we consider, you are protected, you're a queen, you deserve respect. And you can also get this by me not giving you everything. So for example, I'm going to treat you like someone who deserves reverence and can be put on the pedestal even. But that also means every time you call me, I'm not coming to change your tire. I'm just not.
Okay.
I can teach you how to do it so that I can teach my daughter to fish, if you will. But there is such thing as, like you're alluding to, the princess syndrome, where, oh, my daddy would do it for me. He can do anything for me. And then when the daughter gets married off, that I had that issue too. When I first got married, I was like, oh crap, do I call my daddy or do I call my husband? I didn't really know what to do.
Okay.
But again, that goes back to conversations. So you can't give baby girl everything, again, because you want her to have the world and you want to protect her. But what lessons are you imparting upon her? And this is where she's empowered to do the things for herself. She knows daddy would do it, but she also feels like, oh man, daddy taught me how to believe in myself. And again, what better place to get that than from your dad, the one that's going to protect you? This is where a lot of women will say to me, me and my dad, we rock. Like, we have a great relationship. They consider themselves, what I call in my book, the daddy's girl. And I write about her. And when I share her story, I'm talking about a client I had who was told nothing but praises. And she was coming, from her dad, because she was such a responsible daughter. And she was, he really, really loved her and they had a great relationship. And she came to me because she was, she was super anxious because she could not handle criticism. And that's the story I tell in the book. She's my daddy's girl kind of avatar, if you will. She didn't know what it felt like to get criticized from her teacher, from her boyfriend, when she got a bad review at work, or not even a bad review, just less than stellar, because she was a people-pleasing perfectionist. So all that stuff kind of came from her relationship with her dad, the narrative. And he had the best intentions. Like you said, you want to pour into your daughter positive things. And while that is true and such a great parenting thing, what is the flip side of that? How can you transfer that responsibility so that your child is now making it her own job to be empowered and feel amazing?
Wow. Almost makes you don't question whether you want to have kids or not.
I know it's a hard job. My God.
Right. Okay. All right. So now, all right. So again, so from a male perspective, I mean, like say, for example, in the dating world, you're trying to be a good guy, stuff like that. You want to be, and you run across a woman with these type of issues, kind of like you alluded to in your book. Like, how's a man supposed to deal with it? Like, you say, we're dating, she's up, like you said, I expect everything or whatever those issues. What would be your advice to men when they encounter these issues with their, whether it be a girlfriend or a spouse? How should they handle it? And how do they, how do they deal with that?
Like if her daddy issues are coming up, what should the man
Yeah,
do?
like you said, yeah, exactly. Because I remember you
That's a
kind of
good
alluded to
question.
it in your book a little bit.
Yes. I think I don't know if you're talking about the part where my husband and I were in an argument. I shared the story of him saying, "I'm not your dad."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think part of that is going to come with them watching this interview and you asking these great questions about daddy issues, especially from the male perspective. I don't get this a lot, which I really appreciate, because it's about the conversation. If you pick up my book and just get into the mind of a woman, me, just call it me, or women that I've seen over the years, that understanding helps you ask better questions. So as a man, if you're dating, a woman with daddy issues or someone with daddy issues, and you start to notice that there are patterns of behavior where she's withdrawing or he or she is withdrawing or whatever the case is, and you're just like, this something's kind of off, there's an argument happening and she just don't trust me, like she won't let me in. That's what I hear a lot when I'm talking about relationships, is I can't let you get past the wall. Then instead of saying you might have daddy issues, because we talked about it at the beginning of the interview, that can be offensive to people. that might turn her off. Then what you could say is, I wonder, like, why I just feel like you won't let me in, and I'm just really wondering why. I want to get close to you. I want to know more about you, but you seem to be pulling back. Like, am I scaring you? Tell me more about that. That is you asking, or at least that's you asking an open question. Tell me about what this is. If I ask you a question, you kind of snap at me. What is that? Because it makes me feel like I did something wrong, or that I'm not trustworthy, and I want to get to know you, but I'm giving you what I can. You're giving her an opportunity to tell the story, should she choose. You may already know that she has daddy issues, but you're being sensitive about it. And you're pulling on one of the criteria that I have in the book, which is abandonment. I think I always have it bookmarked: abandonment, feelings and or thoughts of abandonment, worthlessness, confusion and or difficulty making decisions is the first criteria from the criterion A. So if you're a man, you're reading the book, you get into my mind, I'm telling you this is what we're dealing with, then you may frame your question differently and pull on one of the criteria. I mean, what do you think about yourself? And I value you. I want you here. I want to hear your voice. But it sounds like you don't really tell me the whole story, like you're afraid I'm going to judge you for whatever you're going to say. That's a daddy issue, that lack of trust in herself, indecisiveness, feeling worthless, like her voice don't even matter. You're touching on her daddy issue without calling it directly that. So you deal with it by having the conversations and doing the hard thing by asking her what she has going on. And then being open to share as well, because sometimes we need a little bit, it's a little give and take, especially if she's someone who doesn't trust, then you got to show up. You got to let her know, bro, like, you got to tell me something too. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's just a matter of getting to know the symptoms and being sensitive and asking those open questions.
Okay. All right. Now, okay, so we talked about it because that's from the perspective, like, dating. Now, let's transfer that to the clinical setting. So I'm a male therapist, I'm reading over your case and say, okay, this might be like a daddy issue. You as a woman coming to me for treatment, what would make you comfortable? What would you want to see from me as a therapist in that initial first setting?
Yes. Oh man, that's a good question. I think, first of all, I want to touch on the fact that you being her male therapist is a great great opportunity for her to see how safe it is to have any relationship with the man. In this case, you would be her therapist. So you have a chance to recreate for her what trusting men can look like. Because a lot of the narrative, if she has daddy issues, is that men don't show up for me, or they don't show up for me in the way they did, or they just kind of trigger whatever the story is with your dad. You have a chance to be able to do that. Like, that's no pressure. But I do want to say that that is such an important piece. And I say that too because Black male therapists like yourself are unicorns. I call y'all unicorns. It's really hard to find a Black male therapist, because for whatever reason, I think. But when people are calling me or sending me DMs and they're like, hey, can you help me find a therapist? I don't know where to start. Then I'm always happy to refer to a Black male therapist I know of, because you have an opportunity to share with her that, that very thing. She needs to hear that you acknowledge the difference in your experiences. So that's one thing. You could possibly start out with an assessment saying something like, I just want to just put it out there. I'm a man. And if there's anything that comes up for you, if you have some questions, then that's okay. If there are things you don't share with me, I understand. And I'm wondering if that's because I am a man. Let's just put it out there. What is it about your relationships or your friendships with men or boys that are different? Because I know you work in a school setting. As the male therapist, you could ask about the dad directly. You could even ask that to your assessment and say, do I remind you of your dad? If that comes up. Is there a reason why you're not speaking up? Is it because I'm a man? I think being very direct, and I talk about that as a clinical supervisor with my people here in South Carolina, about being very direct and just talking about the uncomfortable thing, knowing that you're hoping to hear what she has to say, and she has permission, quote unquote, to be able to tell you the things that she thinks she can't say to you.
Okay. Now, say for example, like sometimes I do private practice sometimes as well, and say I'm treating a couple, and they're coming in about like a marriage issue, but I recognize it's okay, she has some issues of her own. Do you then, how would you treat a couple? Would you recommend them have individual therapy as well, or can you bring those type of issues into the couple session?
Yeah, I don't treat couples because they stress me out, first of all.
Okay.
But I do know couples therapists. And one of the things that my friend who does like sex and relationship and intimacy building work with couples is that very thing you said. So I think it would be appropriate to suggest separate sessions. Now, there are a couple of different ways you can do it. I know that you could have check-ins, not maybe like full therapy sessions, but check-ins like one-offs with your couple on different days. And I actually see like parts of couples. So my friends who treat couples will send me the woman, but still talk about, because they're treating their relationship in couples therapy, they may say something like, it sounds like this is a pattern coming up for you. The fact that you have a trust issue with your husband, I wonder if this is something that has something to do with your relationship with your dad, or have you ever explored that? Whether dad was there, wasn't there, whatever it is, bringing it up in front of the partner, seeing how the partner agrees, if they do agree, and what their experience is and what they think, so they can help expand your view of what their relationship is like and what they think. And then that obviously gets the wheels turning in the person with the daddy issues that you may want to refer out. And so that's one way I can see it happening.
Okay. Now, another question I want, that when I was reading, after I got to the end of this book, I had, I was really asking, can daddy issues ever be healed, or is it something that just has to be as an ongoing treatment thing? I mean, can those voids, whether it be from an absent father, or will those voids ever be filled, or will they always just be there?
Yeah, I think that healing is an ongoing process. What I like to say is that my daddy issues are in remission. Like less intense, because a lot of my daddy issues really kind of are hinged upon identity at the time. I was really insecure about who I was, because as you read, there was a question about my paternity that my dad just refuses to this day to answer. And so I really for years thought I would not be happy. I'm not going to be okay. I'm not going to be whole unless my daddy does this, unless he apologizes in front of everybody and goes down the bullet points of all the ways he's done me wrong, because I was so angry, like kind of blinded by it, not realizing that I have the power to let that go. And so the way that I did that, I know this is a really big question, is how to get over daddy issues. My story and my forgiveness came from the fact that I had to understand what empathy is. So if we go back to you asking that question about parenting and how to not give your kids daddy issues, I had to understand that my dad could not at the time, and possibly even now, give what he didn't get. And knowing what I know about his trauma story, no wonder he couldn't really give me love the way I knew and really, really wanted it, because he didn't see it. All he's seeing is I need to survive. And I am literally a threat to the safety net he has built his entire 50 some odd years on this world. And so even his own daughter is a trigger to, and like the last nail in the coffin that may send him off. So of course he had to put his hand out, because if we're thinking with our trauma brain and we have gone through so much emotional neglect and stress and all that, our brains are only designed to keep us alive. And that's why I specialize in trauma. And when I'm speaking about it, we have to know how the biology of trauma works, how it affects us physically. You literally cannot function except for maybe in 1, 2, maybe 3 modes just to get from one moment to the next. So I started to see my dad as a little boy that was hurt and didn't get what he needed as a kid. So I'm like, dang, man, once I understood that, I had compassion. It helped me move towards forgiveness, because I'm like, well, I can't expect, like our 5-year-old, I can expect him to process certain things that I need as an adult. So where is your father in that process, and how can you possibly have compassion for his story? Now, I do want to say this is different for women who are survivors of sexual assault by their fathers. That's a whole different game, you know. However, that is still a really huge piece. The empathy part of it all is how you can get over daddy issues. So that was a huge weight off for me. It really put a dent in my work, because, and so that left me with, okay, Christian, since I'm over daddy issues and not mad at my dad anymore, right? Hurt, still disappointed, we're not talking, but I'm not angry. It's coming from a different place. It's shifted. Then now I'm dealing with the fact that I still have insecurities about like being an entrepreneur or being a really, really great mom. And while all of these things may not be directly tied to daddy issues, it's the work is ongoing, because obviously there's always something you can do. Something's going to get a little bit louder and more evident, and you have to keep doing the work. And sometimes, just like this week, I'm triggered for the fact that I feel invisible sometimes, and I have to yell to be heard. Like the kids will leave or jump and do what daddy says when daddy says it, my husband, that is. But I have to feel like I have to scream to get everybody to listen to me. That's what I feel like, you know.
Okay.
It's not always true, but it's still an ongoing issue of like I still get hit with like see me type of thing. So it comes in different ways, but after a while, to me, and I'm not even, my dad and I aren't speaking, there's a strong boundary between the two of us. Even with that said, I am whole and happy. So for a while when I was writing the book, I was like, I couldn't finish it, because I'm like, well, dang, man, should I like talk to him about this before I let it out, or should we like reconcile before then? But I'm like, no, this is real life. People need to see that you don't need the other person to release you from your pain. You can do that. You don't have to have a nice little bow tied on top of it, which is why I'm really proud of how it's ended. It's left me with the power to be able to do those things. And that's why there's the how-to tagline in my book, because you can do that work. It doesn't have anything to do with him.
Okay. Now we got about 15 minutes left. So I just want to ask you about a couple of things in the book that I just really stood out to me. Now your relationship with Tony, your first boyfriend. Okay, now do you think, how do I ask this question? What occurred between you and him before you broke up? Do you think that would have occurred if you had a stronger relationship with your father? You were 15, you mentioned the first sexual experience.
Yeah.
if you had the ideal daughter, father-daughter relationship, do you think that would occur when you was 15, or that's something that would occur later?
What would occur exactly? Like my hurt
I mean, like just the whole
or the
thing of
breakup?
losing your virginity at that age
Oh
to
yeah.
him.
I would have to say if we had at the time my dad and I were like decent, him and my mom separated. Um I'm gonna say yeah. I think that if let me just say this, if both of my parents are present
Mm-hmm.
and had decent informative relationships,
Mm-hmm.
conversations with me about relationships and sex,
Mm-hmm.
I really don't think I would have
Okay.
lost my virginity so early. And that's on both of my parents. When my parents separated, my mom was very absent emotionally. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and she was trying to deal with that separation. And she also had my brother and me, and she had to work because she worked a lot, which is like enter me having to grow up a little bit more, a little faster than I needed to. And so if my dad was there, perhaps because he met my first boyfriend that I lost my virginity to, perhaps he would have been able to tell me instead of don't do this, don't do that, which is kind
Mm-hmm.
of like the demeanor I mentioned earlier about the leotards. That's kind of what
Yeah.
that's his parenting style. That's my dad. And so I was scared. I didn't feel like I had permission to tell him anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I was dealing with that by myself. All the feelings
Mm-hmm.
of coming with like, oh, am I a woman now? Is that a thing?
Mm-hmm.
And it would have been great to have daddy there to like walk me through what this looks like. But by
Mm-hmm.
then, the relationship that we had specifically developed was like you do what daddy says, and that's it. We didn't go outside of the parameters. So
Okay.
I think that if we would have had that type of relationship, it would have been fine. Whether he's there or not doesn't really matter because
Okay.
a lot of people will obviously say, my dad was there. And then I'll ask them, was he really? But he was physically there. But was he meeting your emotional needs? Was he making himself available? Or was he home, but he was watching TV or drinking or kind of asking how
Right.
your day was, kind of not? So it's really more than the matter of if he was there. It's like, what would you have done with that time there with me? And I think that would have made a huge difference.
Okay. Another thing, when I was reading, when you were talking about you were getting ready to get married, when you were actually getting married, and you
Mm-hmm.
let your dad walk you down the aisle. When I was reading this, I'm like, no, don't do it. Don't get us satisfaction. Why did you let him do that? Now is that just like a male thing? Me and I always
Mm-hmm.
want revenge and stuff like that. My people were like if I just knew you, I'm like, no, don't let him do it. I'll do it. I'll take his place. Don't let, I was just mad that you did that. I mean,
Oh my
do you
goodness.
regret doing that?
Oh man, this is an exclusive. Nobody's ever asked me that before. This is such a good
Mm-hmm.
question. And so my husband, he told me when he asked for my hand in marriage, he went to my dad only because I wanted him to.
Okay.
He knew that my mom and I always had a good relationship. We've been close this whole time, but he said I had only planned on asking your mom. I didn't even think it was about asking your dad, but I know that that's what you wanted. I wanted that because I was really fighting for the idealized relationship. I really, really wanted it to work. I really wanted to be a daddy's girl because I think to an extent I was for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Him walking me down the aisle, that was 2016. That was like a year before we had our current and last kind of like
Mm-hmm.
breakup where we're not speaking. And so our first son was 5 at that time. And so I invited daddy back into my life when I was about 6.5 months pregnant. I wanted my son to be known. I wanted him to know his grandson. So I invited him back into our life. We mended it, but never talked about the real issue of my paternity. And he really just did not want to go there. There's a lot of hurt there for him. And I get that, but he's not handling it as well as he could because of his trauma,
Okay.
not his fault. And he's protecting himself. So at the time we were good. It was just always this backdrop, this thing that we just were
Okay.
not talking about. So that was me trying to like fake it till I make it. I really want to make this thing work. And that's what we do in relationships. Sometimes even in dating, we just take it and keep it moving. So I thought that might be something that I could handle, but I just could not say anything anymore, even after the wedding. And then the ironic thing is like daddy cried the entire first dance with me and him.
Mm-hmm.
So I know he loves me. He just has things that he has to work through. If we were to ever have a relationship, he may not ever want to speak to me again. That's something I pray about and I think about sometimes. But at that time, we were good to an extent. It's just this one thing that I can't help, and he has to actually take the next step. But yeah, I do think about that sometimes. Like, I ain't lying. I'm like, damn.
Right, no, right. I was like, oh no, I know she did, you know. And then the third thing, when I was getting, you know, when you talking about you were on the phone with him and you were saying how you and your husband don't believe in spanking, then he said, well, if you come to my house, and I was like, you should have put your husband on the phone and told him, you touch my son, I'll beat your ass. You know, that's what I was thinking. So that not want to speak up to your dad, was that just still like that authority type thing where you didn't, where do you think that came from?
The fact that
Right, you didn't tell your dad that, you know, instead of saying, well, if you can't buy my rules, you know, I just won't send my son over there. But instead, you just kind of just, you know, went along with what he said.
Yeah. You know, I think even so, just to be clear, my son, our 11-year-old Carter, and my dad had a really great relationship before we fell out. So I could trust him around my son. He would never hit him. He's never done that. It's just the idea that I wanted my daddy to be proud of me and the kind of mom that I was. And so I know that the way that he parented was to be pretty strict about certain things. And he did spank my brother and me. And that's what a lot of parents did. I don't know that I could not say those things as far as like, you're not going to do this and that with my kid, because there's still a part of me wants to be accepted and want him to see me as a good person and a good parent, and also, you know, protecting my son. And even with my husband, and in that regard, he also trusted my dad enough to take care of him. Like, it was not a big deal, but it all comes back to me, like you said. Like, there was an acceptance piece that I really was looking for, to where it changed the way that I was even going to parent my kid. And so that could have become a conflict between my husband and I, but I protected my husband from a lot of those thoughts and conversations. Because again, like, there's this push and pull, where as women, you know, we get pushed out the nest, but then we still kind of want to be a daddy's girl and be protected, or a mommy's girl and be protected. And it's just like that duality we struggle with as far as like how to deal with it and what to do next.
Okay. Well, yeah. When I was reading it, I mean, I was like, whoa, reading that. I'm like, I guess that's like said milk. And I'd be like, no, you ain't doing this to my son. You know? Right. Okay. All right. So the last couple of minutes, how can people reach Christian? Like, if they want to, obviously, you know, your books on Amazon, put it up there again, books on Amazon, but you mentioned, like you have online courses. Like, how do people find you and your material?
Yes, thank you for asking. So my website is Couch with Christian, CHRISTIAN, as you can see on the screen, couchwithchristian.com. That is my hub, where you get access to the link to my books. You can look on there for my blog. My podcast is on there now. So there are links on there as far as all different things that I'm doing. The most active, I guess, social media that I'm on is my Instagram, because it's easy. It's on my phone. So I'm really active there. I go live pretty regularly. So right now I'm going live every day, every other day for a couple of minutes, and talking about different mental health things. And so, you know, you'll pop in there sometimes, and that's great. And I'll have people who will share and like, or whatever. But sometimes I'll come in session and I'm talking to a client and it inspires something for me that, again, I just want to share. And so my Instagram is always popping with like a recent story or post or something. I'm really excited about my course. That link is in the bio and my Instagram, as well as the link to my books. You can get that, and my website, my podcast. All those links are in the bio on my Instagram, which is at Couch with Christian, all one word, COUCHWITH, and then my name, Christian, at Couch with Christian on my Instagram. You can find links that would take you back to my website. My course that is out right now is launched a month ago, in February 1st, on the 1st of 2022. And it's called Is It Me? How My Daddy Issues May Be Jacking Up My Relationships. So it's a chance for you to get kind of a good foundation. It's the first of a mini series I'm doing, which is how our daddy issues jacking up my friendships, my motherhood, my parenting, or at work, whatever it is, because every chapter in my book is daddy issues and all these things. And so I want to get really specific about how you can take this material and see how it is affecting those very unique relationships. And so the course is about 5 or 6 weeks long if you were to kind of really pace yourself and do like one piece a week. So there are videos in there about, the first chapter is about your body. So you get a chance to understand how your body is physically responding, the physiology of trauma, what that looks like. We're talking about the brain, the parasympathetic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system. Like when you are in relationships, how does your body respond? Because that is where we can start to get control, is how to do that. And so I teach you how to do that. There are worksheets and things. The next chapter, we get into self-talk. And that is like really kind of piecing together the body physically, and then what we're telling ourselves. And then we talk about the inner child. Yeah, in chapter 3. And so because I like to say that I'm helping people become the adults that they didn't have, we're reparenting ourselves. So inner child work is a huge piece of how I practice. So that's in the course as well. And then a bonus chapter for survivors of sexual assault by their fathers, because that deserves and frankly needs to have a separate conversation. So that's a whole different chapter. So the course is, not only are you getting that, but once you buy the course, you get into a group that I have specifically for the women who join the course. It's a private Facebook group, so you can go and engage and talk about it and stuff like that. We may do a pop-up live or group. But yeah, you can find me on my website, Couch with Christian, at Couch with Christian on Facebook and Instagram. And you'll find out all my content there.
All right. Now, so now would there be a course for the men coming up in the future?
I do. The more that I am thinking about it, I originally wanted to write a book for men with daddy issues, and then I got caught up with really trying to get the most out of this one. And so I would love to pick your brain about how we could make that happen, as far as what you think men could need or what they would need. So I'm definitely open to it. I treat men too. My caseload is mostly women right now, but I do treat men too for other things. So I'll be down for it.
Definitely. Well, I really thank you for taking the time out your busy schedule to interview me. I mean, it seems like we just started. It flew by so fast. I mean, I still got a couple hours of questions to ask, but but this was really, I mean, I really enjoyed this because I enjoyed the book. And I recommend everybody, whether you be male, female, whether you be a therapist or not. I mean, the book is written in easy, everyday language that anybody can pick it up and read it. I mean, I strongly, whether you think you have daddy issues or not, I'm telling you, pick up this book. It's going to be an eye-opener no matter who you are. So I strongly recommend everybody who's seeing this interview get the book. Like I said, I use the book. I send it to my clients in therapy. I use it with my students at school. I mean, this is just a really wonderful book. It's available on Amazon, so please go out there and get it. I'm going to be getting the workbook soon myself to start going through those. So again, Christian, thank you so much for this interview. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for having me.
No problem. Couch with Christian. Check out, she's on Instagram. Go to her website. You won't be sorry. So in closing, I just want to say thank you again.
Thank y'all.
All righty.